Hello and welcome to this Unity Terrain tutorial. If you purchase Terrain Composer, it's important to know about the Unity Terrain first, how it works, before getting started with Terrain Composer. So Terrain Composer is not in the project, but we're going to create terrain how you would have to do it normally with Unity. So go to Game Object, create Other, and we create a terrain. Then we can see a square terrain appear in the scene. In the hierarchy there's a game object called terrain, and if we click on it in the inspector there's all the terrain properties, and in the project it is saved as a new terrain asset, and this contains all the terrain data. So if you click on terrain, there is the transform, and the position can be changed in there. So you can see these values changed. Rotation and scale doesn't have any influence. You cannot rotate a terrain, but the scale can be set, but in the settings icon in the terrain script. So let's reset the position. The first three icons in the terrain script are for manually painting the height map, and we go over it. This is like to paint on a specific height. This is to higher and lower the terrain, and this is for smoothing. Then there is the paint texture brush. That's for painting splat textures on the terrain and adding them here. And then there's the trees and the grass. This is all manual painting, and this you can still use after you use Terrain Composer if you want to make manual changes, and it's very handy to fine-tune your terrain. And here is the settings icon, and in there are all the terrain settings, the parameters of the detail, the pixel error. I will explain this later, and tree distance and grass paint distances, and wind speed settings for the grass. And here is resolution, and your terrain size can be changed there. And there's the height map resolution, the detail resolution, which is the grass, then the splat map texture resolution, and the base texture resolution. I will all explain these parameters later, but first let's change the terrain width and see how that works. And here you can see that the width and the height of the terrain changes. And the scale Unity uses is like 1 meter is 1 Unity unit. So this will be 1 by 1 kilometer. But let's get back to 2 kilometers again. The terrain height can also be changed. So now the maximum terrain height we can get is 600 meters. And the height map on Unity terrain works like normalized from 0 to 1. So every value, and 1 is then multiplied by the terrain height, which would give you 600 meters. If you put it to 1000, you will notice that your terrain will get higher to a kilometer. Okay, let's start painting the height map. So we click the raise and lower terrain icon, and there you can see the brush. Now it's size 1, and we can make it bigger by moving that slider. If you click, it will raise the terrain, and you can see it goes pretty quick. It will raise the terrain until we reach our terrain ceiling, which is 600 meters. And if I want more opacity, that's the strength, so now it will even go faster. I recommend to use a very low opacity so you have precise control, and also the brush size not too big. If you shift click, it will lower the terrain again. And here you can also select different brushes, so you can paint a little detail on it. And if we go again to 1 brush size, you'll see this is the lowest size we can get, and it's limited by the height map resolution. And if we switch to wireframe here, and go to settings, it can be changed in height map resolution over here. So now we have a 513 height map, and you also notice that there's like different, this is the whole grid, and it is like 513 by 513, but we see it is drawn differently, and it's optimized by Unity's lot level level of detail system, and it will optimize the terrain and paint as less polygons as possible to boost performance. It can be controlled with pixel error. If you move it to 1, it will draw the maximum detail, and if you move it to 200, you can see that it's painting a low resolution. So even if you have a high height map resolution and in your game you want to use a lower one, you could set it with pixel error by script, so that somebody can dial it down in the menu if he has a slower computer. So that's very handy. But here we have 513. It always has to be the double, it's like 512 and then added 1. So then it will be 1024, but you have to add 1. So let's change it now, and now the resolution will be double as high. So we will paint again, and oh, there's way too much opacity. But you can see how the grid gets more fine-tuned. So let's go even higher with the double again. And let's paint again, and now the squares are even smaller. So the higher resolution you have, the more detail you can paint on the terrain size. So you can go maximum to a 4K. Only there's a little bug in Unity that it cannot be set over here, as I will try to do it, but then somehow there's a maximum check, and it checks for 4096. So it thinks it goes over it, but you don't. But with Terrain Composer you can set it to a 4K. Let's do our 1025, and then we switch to normal mode again. Okay, let's quickly paint something now again. Brush size, and then let's go to the second one to paint on height. If you left mouse click, you can see it samples the height here. You can see it changing. And then when you paint, it will paint to a maximum height. So it's very nice to make terraces with it. And then there's the smooth brush, and with that you can smooth your terrain. So if I would have it very rough here, and you do smooth, you can smooth it out, and it works the same with the strength, the brush size. Okay, so this is the height map part of the Unity terrain, the manual painting, and let's move over to painting textures. So let's add splat textures. We click on Edit Textures and then Add Texture. Here you can see the texture. This is the diffuse splat texture, and here is the normal map. Since Unity 4, the default terrain shader supports normal maps, so you can have some bumps on your splat texture up close. So let's click on Select, and you'll notice that there's not any usable textures in here. Unity comes with a default terrain package, so if you click on Assets, Import Package, and then Terrain Assets, and then we click Import, and we can see what's in there. If we click Select again, there's 4 splat textures, 2 grass textures, and there's also a palm tree in there. So we click on Good Dirt, and then Add, and you will see that the whole terrain texturing changes to dirt, and we can see it up close here, the detail. It's also a bit dark, so we added directional light in Game Object, create other directional light. So, and this can be switched on and off with the light icon over there. Other splat textures, so the grass, and then the grass rock, and the cliff texture, Now let's start painting with the brush again, and it pretty much works the same as with the height map. Only there's one more slider, and that's the target strength. And that's the strength, the opacity strength you will reach with one paint. So if you hold the mouse button, you'll see it only reaches like half strength. So if I would put it higher, then the maximum will be higher. Okay, let's paint some cliff over here. So we do more. Okay, and if we select the lowest brush size, again you see the smallest you can get. This you can change with, again, in settings, and then control texture resolution. So if we make it double, 1024, go back to painting, you'll see that the resolution gets twice as high, so you have more control to where to paint. If we move it to, change it to 2048, you will even have more control, and that's also the maximum you can use. So you can create very detailed texture, just very small adjustment. You can even paint a road with this on the terrain. And then there's another thing, and that's the tile size. So if you click edit texture and then edit, the tile size is set over here. If I will set this to 1, then the splat texture is over the terrain 2048 times, the same as the splat resolution. If I will change it to 2048, it will be tiled once, and you would see the whole texture once. So if I change the brush size and paint quickly, it's just the whole texture once over the terrain. For cliffs, I recommend to use about 40 or 30 to avoid tiling. And this tile size requires fine-tuning. The lower tile size, the higher detail up close, but far away you will see more tiling. Okay, let's move over to placing trees. For this we click the tree icon, and then there's no trees in here, and we can do the same with edit trees and then add tree. Then you have to click this little round button, and there's only one tree, and that's the palm tree, and that was from the standard terrain asset package. Here again you have the brush. If you hold it, it will paint the trees. If you shift click, it will remove them again. And here you can set different brush types, like the density you want to paint, more color variation, the tree height, and then the variation. If we do refresh, yeah, the trees will be refreshed. You can also mass place trees, like I want to place 10,000 trees, but they will be placed without rules, so they will be over the whole terrain. If you want to reset your trees, then you would have to mass place trees 0 trees, and then it will reset them again. Trees are positioned on the terrain in an array, and they are saved in the terrain data, so there is no control map like the splat control, but trees are placed in a tree prototype, and that contains the position, the width, the height, the tree color, the light map tree color. So you can place trees very precise based on effective tree position, and you can place about a maximum of 1.5 million trees, but I recommend to not go too high, because you really have to keep an eye on the memory in Unity. So if we take a look, Unity editor has a limitation of 3 gigabytes, so you should always have an eye on the memory that you don't go too high, otherwise Unity can crash if you go out of memory. 2.8, 2.9, Unity will become very unstable. Trees do have position but no rotation, so there's only one rotation. And a way to overcome that is you add more tree types of maybe the same tree, and you can rotate them in the tree creator. Let's move over to grass now. So here in edit details we can add our grass texture, and let's add this one, and then we have the width and the height range, the way it spreads, and then a healthy and a dry color, and if it's a billboard. So let's add the grass texture. What the billboard means is that the grass or a grass is like a plane, and that is always facing the camera. That is what a billboard does. And if we disable that option, then you can see the grass patch is rotated randomly. And I personally prefer to use this version because a billboard also takes extra performance from the shader, so this is quicker, and I like it when the grass is not moving with you when you move the camera. But it's very much a matter of taste. And let's add our second grass texture. Grass resolution can be changed with detail resolution. So if I change this to 1024, I will double the resolution. The detail resolution is an array inside, like an X and a Y. So you can choose any size, like you can also go like choose 800. So it's not depending on a power of 2. Something you have to keep aware of, and that is for every grass texture you add, Unity will make another array that is stored in the terrain data, so it will add up memory and performance. I recommend to not go too high resolution with grass, because placing massive amount of grass can make Unity editor pretty slow, and also it's quite heavy on performance also in runtime. And then if you move and new grass patches are loaded in the back, you can get a frame rate drop. And let's move over the terrain settings. So there is a pixel error, which I already explained. There is a base map distance, so let's quickly paint some grass and cliff here. Now you see the details of the splat texture. What the base map is like it's only an image of colors of your splat textures. So when you move out of range, Unity will change this to only the color, and that will render much quicker. So that's where you can use base map distance for. It's like a separate map, and it has its own resolution, and you can see that in here. So if I would lower the resolution, it will get less detailed, as you see. I like to use high base map distance, and actually always see the splat texture resolution. If you work for high performance hardware, that will look the best. Then there is cast shadows, which to be turned on in your directional light. So if I enable hard shadows, and then in edit project settings quality, you can set the shadow distance. So if I move that to 1000, that might be already too much, like 200, you can see shadows coming. On the terrain, you might get some bias, as you see over here, and that you should change in the bias over here to get that bias away from here. Materials can be used for unique parameters for each terrain, although I need to mention that with multi-terrains with many materials, Unity will get a lot slower, so that's something to think about. With draw is for painting trees and grass, and then with the detail distance you can set the paint distance of the grass. In the editor you can go max to 250. In Terrain Composer you can make that higher, because in code you can set everything higher. Also recommend to not use too much in this, because it's also very tedious for performance. Also tree distance can be set, and trees work with billboarding and the 3D tree system. Billboards will swap to 3D trees, as you can see here, and that can also be set with these parameters, like the billboard will start at 50 meters. There's a fade length from the billboard to the 3D tree, and the maximum amount of 3D trees you can have in your scene. Then there is the wind settings, and these are for grass. Also the grass tint. So let's move the camera over to the middle, so that would be 1000. Now let's just drag it there. So we take a look at the grass and runtime and see the movement and how you can set the wind settings. So I click play, and there you can see it moving. So with these settings you can change the speed of the wavement, the size, so that's like, it's like a sinus moving over the grass, and this is the scale of the sinus. So now you see grass move more independently, and there's the bending strength. Now of course don't set that too high, but you see the trees don't move, and you can add a wind zone to your terrain. So you do in the component and then wind zone. The trees don't move, and that can be because of the bend factor. Yes, the bend factor is 0. So if we put it at 0.5 and then apply, now they should move. Yeah, and you can see them moving. And if you added bend factor to 1, they move slightly more. In the documentation is the settings for, and it's in the reference, and you look for wind zone, and there you can see what values you can use in the wind zone to get realistic wind. A last thing to mention is the terrain collider. With the terrain collider, if you use a character controller, you won't fall through the terrain, and you can do collision detection on the terrain with other colliders on objects. Also, you can create tree colliders for trees placed on the terrain. But for this to work, so we have the palm tree in here. The palm tree, if we drag and drop it in the scene, your tree should have a collider, and this tree doesn't have a collider, so we have to place it on first. So the way to do it is to, we don't need the animation, so we can remove that component. We go to component, and then to physics, and then to capsule collider, and then we have to fine tune it. Radius of 1 gives this. I think we need 0.2 to 5 maybe. And then you also notice if the collider is not in the middle of the tree. So we center it out. Yes, in the center will be good. Height, that's not so important now, but you can fine tune it. Then you need to make a prefab out of it, so you drag and drop it in the, but first we have to disable the search. So let's see here, here's the palm tree. So we grab the game object, we drag and drop it in a project, and it automatically will create a tree prefab. This prefab then we have to assign at our terrain, so we drag and drop it into the tree, we do some bend factor, we edit, we can delete that tree, and then we can start painting, not so much trees, a little bit more, and let's hit play, let's see if it works. So now we move and we don't fall through the terrain, and we should hit a tree, and that's what we're doing. These were the basics of the Unity terrain. Thank you very much for watching.